those Sarah just shown up for us. And on this opening picture, you can see this old growth patch in Transdanubia, one of the biggest old patch in the country. You can see the structural differences and so on. So these are just islands in the sea of managed forests. Usually, in later on, I will talk about these old patches because they are the most natural, of course. So let me join. Okay, so what is forest naturalness? I'm not sure that in every country we use this term or we understand the same on it. But anyhow, we like to walk in forests like this, which looks natural, and we don't like too much those which are far away from naturalness. And we can somehow formulate this word. How far is the naturalness of the particular forest stand from a hypothetical natural reference? So in this case, in Hungary, we have to somehow imagine what is the natural state, and of course some scientists created some model on it, and that would be the natural reference. And we can go into any kind of forest and check, especially these variables or indicators, like a canopy layer, of course, is very important, especially because the forest management is modifying the canopy layer the most, not only the composition, not only the structure, but species composition as well, especially in Hungary, where the forests, let's say almost half of the forests are not of natural composition. They are completely new artificial forests. We can also check the shrub layer and the game effect. We can check the game effect mainly on the shrub layer, how the leaves and twigs are destroyed, and of course the tree generation and the herb layer. We can also check the soil disturbances, and a lot of indicators can be put to these main variables and thresholds as well. So, for example, in the lowlands, you can find stands really side by side. This is a remnant of a lowland Pannonian oak forest, and the next one is a typical plantation, and you can compare the naturalness of these stands pretty easily with these variables. So there was a group of people at the beginning of the 2000s to make field work all across the country. There were about 2,000 sample points, and the result is somehow like this. Don't worry about the numbers, because those are just the numbers of the forestry regions. This scale shows somehow the level of naturalness. So you can see that Hungary has like this two-phase phenomena: the lowlands, the Great Plain, and the small plain is also consists of a lot of artificial forests. Those are either poplar plantations, robinia plantations, and pine plantations, and which you can see somehow green. Those are mountains with natural forests mostly, and in the western part of the country where hills and lower mountains are present, you can see somehow the colors in between, and of course this is a mixture of different categories, and you can see just averages in every region. Yeah, this is just myself doing some pilot based on the protocol it was part of a project which we did together with the Danube National Park Directorates here in this region. It was a military area with very interesting and mosaic-like forest types. Okay, so next step was after having this map that there was a desktop analysis carried about by the forestry sector, and every single forest compartment was classified somehow in this 5 or 6. One is missing here, and or they are combined here together. Initially, there are 6 categories of naturalness, and you can see them on the map as well. And these categories are in the forestry code, or recent forestry code or forestry law, which was created in 2009, consists of these 6 categories of naturalness, and some of the requirements in the law is based on the naturalness type. So I think it's really impactful that we have different rights, or the managers have different rights to do if the forest is of higher naturalness or of lower naturalness. And yeah, also as WWF Hungary, we did some lobby work on this forestry code, and to push forward this continuous cover forest management, we created a kind of proposal, and it was also based on partly based on the naturalness categories. So it was really important to have them. Namely, you have to do continuous cover forest management if your forest is on the this part or this one. So if it is more natural and state owned, and there are other specialties as well, but the main point is that based on the naturalness categories, we could do some step forwards on continuous cover forest management in our policy work. This is actually a simplified version of the original field survey and those naturalness numbers, and mainly based on the 3 species composition, if it is native or non-native or even invasive. So if you have a low category, it means that there are a lot of non-native or even invasive species consisted or comprised in the canopy. Okay. Some comments. Okay, it seems to work now. Okay. Yeah. So I just tried to place over this map, which is a kind of official map on these categories over the Global Forest Watch map. That was an old version what I found, and you can, if you focus on the yellow dots, you will see the representation in the Global Forest map. So these are those areas, and it shows these blue and pink spots shows the regeneration and also the loss. So it shows also that this sort of artificial forests are managed by very short rotation methods. So this map also shows the difference of the regions. Yeah, and there was another desktop analysis just recently by Eszter Tanács and Tibor Standolár it was based on the National Forestry Database, which is quite detailed in Hungary, and it is using much more indicators. You can just have an idea how much, and we can get this more detailed map. And it is quite similar to those which have been we already seen. We can do some survey on regions as well. So the red color, for example, represents forests where the good naturalness state is just 0 or 20%. 20%, yeah. So it shows that in this region, very few forest stands are of higher naturalness. There are some spots, of course, but generally the picture is quite bad. If we put the plantations also in the analysis, the picture is even worse. So you can see that most the country is consisting very few forests which are of higher naturalness. You can see some regions like the Bakony Mountains or the Őrség or Mecsek, where this share is higher, but still the lowlands, big chunk of the country, is not so promising from this point of view. Okay, so this is because of the artificial plantations. Just to underline, this is of historical reasons. So during the Middle Ages, most of the Carpathian Basin was used as a grassland or arable land later on, and just very few patches of forests remained. So that's why after many centuries, in the 20th century, they started to launch large-scale reforestation, and those reforestations were used these mostly non-native or non-local species. For example, pine, Pinus sylvestris, is a native species in western Hungary, but not on the lowland as plantations. Okay, let's a little bit focus on the Bükk National Park, which is on this map. It's quite on the middle by naturalness. And let's talk about a little bit on forest management, because the largest impact on naturalness, forest naturalness, is still coming from the management. I think we wouldn't too much argue on that. It not only replaces the species, but it has a very heavy impact on the composition, the age structure. It removes microhabitats or biotope trees most of the time, of course, depending on the silvicultural method. So this is Bükk National Park. It's the very middle, so I'm not talking about something from the edge or buffer zone or what. This is the very middle. I'm standing in almost 1,000 meters high in a rock and doing this picture to the south. And you can see the effect of the conventional forest management. This is, I wouldn't say this is exceptional for Hungary. This is used in all Central European countries, not in Slovenia, but in the former monarchic countries, like from Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, part of Romania, and so on. What is interesting in Hungary that we are using it in almost everywhere, even in protected or strictly protected areas, in national parks as well. So what we miss as NGOs, and we try to say all the time that we don't have zoning systems in national parks, we don't have core zones, and so on. So that's why the forest management substitutes somehow the conservation management in most cases. And there is a long debate in between the forestry sector and the conservation sector. Is it good for the forest or not? Of course, it was on different level at the 70s, like now, compared to now. We have a lot more scientific narratives and evidences and so on, but still on a political level, nothing really changed so far. Okay, so for example, if we cross the main road in the Buk National Park, you can find very different sceneries, like this old growth forest, which you have trees older than 150 years. You will find a lot of felling areas and young stands, and the whole national parks is a patchwork of these spots. Just a little detour on forest or silviculture methods. So vágásos in Hungarian, it means rotation forestry, clear cut or shelter wood. There is this long word I want to translate. It means there is no regular timber extraction, so the green. And this is close to nature forest management, this pale green color. So you can see that a very small portion is used. And the columns, like these are the strictly protected and Natura 2000 forests together. So you can see that more than half of the forests are managed by this rotation forestry methods, even in strictly protected areas. Of course, in non-protected, you will find this in most cases. And a kind of a result, if you compare the non-protected forest, the naturalness of those stands, of course you will find the least satisfactory category here, and just a smaller portion of better ones. But for the strictly protected, the picture is also very colorful. So even in strictly protected forest, you will find very low natural stands and just a little bit better and relatively small portion of the best ones. And so it all shows, if you just remove the plantations, the picture is even more even. Like you can almost compare the non-protected columns by naturalness with the strictly protected. It shows that the forest management, as an effect or impact, it generates or makes all forests similar in Hungary, and not too much exceptions. Yeah. So, and this is about how people can experience forests. So those village people who live nearby these old stands, they know how a forest should look like, and lowland people mostly find these as forests. So, and the debates in between the general public is somehow very hard, because especially lowland people just don't understand why NGOs and what we are talking about and what are the main problems. We have forests over there, and still the statistics, the numbers are also increasing. Like in the last 100 years, the Hungarian forest, the extent of the Hungarian forest just improved constantly. Okay, another small block. We tried this. It was also a desktop analysis by us, like WWF Hungary. We used the naturalness categories, like the 4 and 5, and the age classes in the different forest compartments to spot somehow the most valuable forests, also from naturalness point of view and old growthness point of view. So we got this map. And in the last years, I went all across the country and tried to visit some of the spots. And just let me pick some. Okay, this Vértes is with the biggest spot in the country, but the Bükk Mountains have the most old forests. Okay, let's have a closer look to these three patches. Interestingly enough, there is an old growth patch very near to Budapest, the capital. So I think most laymen would guess that the oldest and most natural forests are somewhere in very remote places, which is not the case. This is an old recreation area. So near Budapest, you will find very mixed forest with trees older than 200 years. And okay, these paler colors just showing 160 years, or the yellows are 140, but still they are looking old growth forest. Okay, this is the highest part of the country, the Matra range, and you will see the highest range with older forests. The pales are like 80 years or 100 years, and only these fragments are older. And this blue spot is the famous Kékes reserve, where the only primeval forest in Hungary prevails. Still very small, it's like 60 hectares, but it was never logged. Okay, and this one, the Bükk National Park, what I've shown previously, have the most old patches. I don't know actually what is the historical background. I was looking and checking all the texts, but most probably the former ownership structure is a kind of explanation. So it was used as a hunting ground for noble families, and that's why it was not harvested in the Middle Ages or in the early modern times. And still, because because it's a national park, they have some measures to not let all the stands cut down. Okay, so these are just interesting infos. And for the end, so this is my last slide. Just some questions. What policies help improving forest naturalness? If I would say just a sentence, none of them are really effective in my point of view. So, for example, the National Conservation Law, it says that you have to leave residual trees after the logging, or you have to leave some dead wood, or you have to take care of the trees with nests. But these are just very superficial prescriptions, and it doesn't change profoundly the traditional forest management method as such. So it has very little impact on naturalness. It has, but not so much. Okay, the National Forest Law, I mentioned before, the new forest management law is a step forward because it uses the naturalness categories. And there is also prescription that if you have a forest with a certain level of naturalness, you cannot do deliberately nothing to step back. So you have to keep it at least that level of naturalness. So it's quite a strong prescription, but still it's just a conservation of the current situation, not a real improvement. And okay, the habitats directives, so Natura 2000 areas are managed the same way. Okay, somehow they are similar in prescriptions with the protected lands, so I think it has some impact. So outside of protected land, if you have something Natura 2000, it's of course a sort of advantage. EU biodiversity strategy, so these are just political statements at the moment. Nature restoration law, I checked the indicators and the thresholds, they are not so very, how to say, strong. So, of course, if we move this direction, that would be positive, but it won't change the big picture in decades, just on a very, very long time. Yeah, and we are waiting for these guidelines on old-growth forests and coastal nature forestry. These are also volunteer tools, but still they would be beneficial. Okay, so this is from my side. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. So we actually got 7 minutes for questions. We didn't have any questions with Jon and this Augustine. But are there any questions? But I would really ask you to keep it short. Question and answer need to be kept short. Yeah. Laszlo, Sarah, Augustine, Jon. Who's got a question? Okay, Lina.
Should I wait for the mic?
Yep. Sure, you're gonna
Okay. Maybe this is not short enough, but I still have a question, and it's for the whole panel. Because all of us who are here, we are in different shapes or form affected by the Renewable Energy Directive, the Nature Restoration Law, the LULUCF regulation, the Forest Monitoring Law that is around the corner, and the EVR that now most likely will be delayed. And as we have learned very well from all your presentations, this forest industry have been very, very good at putting in indicators that just paves the way for business as usual. For example, they have made the whole EU body focus on the age of the living biomass still standing, the teenagers in this ecosystem, the tree cover, which is something that you can replant, and then the amount, the quantity of dead wood, often killed wood. And then they are always blocking the same 3 indicators that we would like to have. We would like to have an indicator for uneven canopy layers. We would like to have an indicator for soil disturbance, carbon and water. And we would like to have an indicator on quality dead wood, often not killed. And we would like to have their age, some sort of measure on them, because those are not teenagers. Those are 400 plus. And all of you guys prove that we can do this. We can show where those forests are. We can actually map and find and prove those 3 indicators. So if the knowledge is there, if the satellites are there, if you guys are there, what could we do in order to put them in the law?
Okay, who wants to answer that question? Actually, Peter would have been good, but he's not here anymore. Augustine, maybe you?
I can say one thing, that we have these laws, they are very vague, and it's not easy to use them, but I really think that the law is as much as we make out of it. That we are here exactly for this reason, to push for ambitious implementation, to hold the governments accountable for implementing these laws, and to basically this. So I know that we have an imperfect policy framework, but I think we can do a lot with it if we strategically think how to work on ambitious implementation. And it's true both for Renewable Energy Directive, it's true for Nature Restoration Law, it's true for all the other pieces of legislation that we have there.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, I also have a question. That from your presentation, it seemed that
Sorry, you would like to comment to the speaker. Now I would like to ask a question for Sarah to begin with. I saw that in Hungary you had an age limit beyond 100 years. How do you go beyond the age of satellite images from the 80s to determine whether the forest is older than 100 years?
So that data is from a paper by Besnard et al. So I think you can look at the paper for the exact methodology, but they combined forest inventory data and ground data with satellite images and then extrapolated using a model and other indicators. So it's a combination of information which was used in that, that map.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed. Beyond satellite images, it's difficult, but
Yeah.
I think they did show some forest areas which are a couple of 100 years old.
Okay. I thought you made it
Yeah.
within Global Forest Watch that you were tracking forests further back in time and within that time window, 14 and 5 time window that Landsat images.
Yeah, no, indeed, and we're not kind of exclusively going to use Landsat data on Global Forest Watch. So this data set from Besnard et al., we are considering implementing it in Global Forest Watch. They're working on change information, so change in forest age, which might be interesting as well. Maybe it's something you can do by combining loss and so on. So we're kind of waiting for advances to see whether that might be useful and what the user needs. And, yeah, but indeed.
Thank you, thank you. I just have a very short question for you, Laszlo. You were showing now that forestry is going on actually clear cutting within the Nature 2000 areas. When I was working as an administrator at the County Administrative Board in Sweden, I was working with exactly Nature 2000, and I was always told that this is the strongest legislation we have, and it is quite strong in Sweden, but it's because of the implementation. If we now have all these future laws and legislation coming, what does this all say about the implementation and actually how EU is trying to enforce these implementations in each member state? Does it really matter if we have a lot of legislations, if they can actually not enforce the legislation in all our member countries? For me, it's like, if the member states can do whatever they want with these areas, what's the point of having them? What do you say?
I absolutely agree. So these are just papers. If we cannot implement or enforce it, and also I absolutely agree that in most guidelines we are using indicators which are not really touching the point. What is missing, for example, for me is silviculture. I know that a lot of examples or categories all across Europe, but the silvicultural type or method determines a lot of variables in the forest. If we are using clear cuts or just regular shelter wood, it's very different if we compare to continuous cover forest management. And it seems to me that the decision makers don't want to place it into these materials or documents. The solution is just lobby work, and a critical mass. I do think that we are not loud enough, and sometimes it's, for example, there are other examples. For example, EU biodiversity strategy is too much ambitious. It also looks like it is also useless because it wants too much. So 10% strictly protected land in Central Europe is impossible. But at the same time, this nature restoration law is very weak and vague, and not having those indicators that you have just mentioned. So that's just a huge gap, and just this gap shows, at least for me, that we are not loud enough, we are not clear enough, we are not using the same narratives, we are not using the same wording like NGOs and scientists and decision makers as well. This whole issue is very much on the back. I can understand, of course, that war and pests and there are a lot more problems for the everyday people, and forests are like kind of heavens for them to escape. But still, it should be much more advocacy work behind.
Can I just say one thing? We have we cut the lunch time to 1 hour, yeah, and it started 2 minutes ago. So, the more questions you ask, the less time we've got for lunch.
Last question.
Okay. Stefan, okay.
Please, sure.
We are still collecting ideas for how to improve the state of European forests. And here's one more suggestion. I'm referring to Jon Andersson's presentation, and he impressively showed that nature conservationists are always behind what's happening, right? Destruction of primary forest happening, and then, well, you're too late. So what about introducing or like turning around the provisioning of proof of evidence for that any impact or any forest management won't have a negative impact on the forest? Right now, so there should be something like an environmental impact assessment before any forest management action happening. Yeah. So that a forest company, a forest owner has to apply for really, and provide the evidence that there won't be any negative impact. Any comments on that?
I think that's actually the whole reason why we're doing this survey, to determine whether you have a high chance of risk of destroying the environment because of that. If you are harvesting in an area that we know has really low natural values because they've been clear cut before, in Sweden's case, it's not so necessary to do a survey. But if it is old growth or if it is old, then obviously you should do a survey before, so that you know that you're not destroying something. And when it comes to all other exploitation apart from forestry, you actually have to do this. So forestry has like this exception to this rule nowadays. But it should not.
We don't want any more exceptions.
No more exceptions. They should just follow other rules. Thank you.
In the afternoon, we will have time to continue the discussion on this as well. And we will have one more session after lunch. We have 1 hour for lunch break now until 1:30. Then we have the last session with Marta, Michal, and